Further ado, let me introduce today's guest. It is Michael. Michael is a trainee therapist at the organization, but more importantly, he was our Nightingale navigator for the past 8 months, now moving into that therapy role, saying goodbye to his infant child as it flows down the river stream. There's a bit of a Moses imagery going on here, into the arms of another person. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Michael, how would you describe the Nightingale Project? Because I know there's sort of two different parts to it. So there's, for us, it's about a role of supporting supporters of survivors, but then there's also this other side, which hinges off this room that we're actually literally sat in right now, which is about police interviews. Do we want to start with that part and then talk about the survivor supporters?
Yeah, sure. It's exactly that. So the Nightingale services, as you said, fall into two camps. So the Nightingale Project focuses on all things around the criminal justice process. And like you said, we have this suite here that can be a space for survivors who want to report and give their video recorded interview, or VRI, to the police as part of the investigation process. What we found was that having the option for a sort of a third party space that could be more familiar, more comfortable, is a really sort of good option for those who might have a tougher time giving their best evidence
in a police station, for example. Yeah, exactly. Which is, they're not usually, when you're usually in a police station, it's not because you've done anything good, you've not done anything brave. They're not always the nicest of environments, certainly. Yeah. And also, you know, it's a simple fact that I feel like a lot of our survivors, because of just life happening to them, may not always have the best experiences of police stations, certainly.
Exactly. And having that flexibility and that option just gives them that bit more control over the narrative.
It's choice. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. And then what about the other side of things? So the survivor supporters, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so that actually came off the back of the Nightingale Project, as of course there would be loved ones, partners, parents, siblings, friends that would come with the survivor as sort of emotional support
the entourage.
On the day, on the day of the video recorded interview. We found that there wasn't really support for them. You know, they're going on their own journey as well, and they want to be in the best position they can to support the survivor, but also ensure they're looking after themselves as well. So the point of the Nightingale services in terms of that wraparound support is the idea that supporters and the support network of the survivor feels heard too, and ensures that they're being kind of looked after as well in that process. So there's a space for them to voice their own kind of experiences of that journey. And so it started with just sort of support for the supporters and loved ones through the criminal justice process, but it's kind of grown since then. So we're starting to grow into more sort of therapeutic support, emotional support, and peer support as well.
Yeah. So on that front, I know for a little while we've provided support through therapy, one-to-one therapy, the same therapy available to our guys, our survivors, to people's loved ones. But it's now sort of expanded a little bit. I think there's a couples offering as well.
Yeah. So very recently we've started offering couples therapy as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. So I think it's our lovely therapist Sandeep is taking the lead on that one.
Yeah,
exactly. Brilliant. And I think it's really nice to sort of celebrate the importance of these relationship bonds as a whole. Survivorship can have any number of impacts on relationships. That's a total understatement. So bringing that together and putting that in the space, looking at building up someone's support very directly, I think is really, really crucial. And certainly as well, you mentioned safe rooms now too, which is something we've always offered for our guys more generally, but then specifically for supporters.
Exactly, yeah. So it was inspired by the safe room here, of course. And it's a space where, as I said, a lot of people who are supporting survivors often don't know anyone else who's been through that experience. And it's just to contribute to that wraparound support. So in the same way that we don't want a survivor to feel like they're going on this journey alone, we don't want supporters and loved ones to feel that either.
No.
So it's a space where they can share their experiences of their sort of last 2 weeks as you would in the safe room.
Yeah.
And you know, it doesn't even have to be around that specific journey. It's just a place where they know people understand to an extent what's happening with them, and they can share those experiences and thoughts and feelings together.
It's really important and healthy to acknowledge and I don't like this word, but the burden that this process can have on people, and to say that we know that you're going along with a survivor through their traumatic journey. It can be a very long process. Yeah, exactly. The wait for court is getting longer by the day. So, you know, having this support in place is really, really crucial. What are the kind of impacts that we can see on people's supporters in terms of maybe their loved one? It could be a friend, a son, a partner who's just maybe disclosed survivorship, going through the police process or going through their own trauma process. What's the kind of impact that you've noticed on people's supporters?
So I think there can be an element of, I suppose, vicarious trauma when you see someone that you care deeply about going through a difficult process, or hearing that someone that you love has experienced a trauma. That can be very distressing to hear.
Yeah.
And it can also be hard to express that, because it feels like there's sometimes this feeling that expressing that you're hurt and sad to hear that this has happened can sometimes make someone who has sort of been through that journey make a survivor feel as if they're burdening
a retreat
the person.
And pull backwards.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm sorry I did that to you.
Exactly. When it's simply just it's empathy, really, and that can be really distressing for the loved ones around in that support network. And I think also what can be really difficult is supporters don't always necessarily know how they can support. There's not a manual, right? So there's no clear rules to follow, and it can be quite a confusing process knowing how to be there and support the best way they can, whilst also making sure they're looking after their own sort of well-being.
Yep.
And so the aim of the Nightingale services is to by no means tell them what to do or teach them, but to share kind of experiences and insights that might be helpful to them.
Yeah, so it's built around this idea of, we are not here to tell you how to do it.
Exactly.
You can share together and you can work on these strategies, sort of in a more collective approach.
Exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really, really crucial, that kind of sort of shared knowledge passing on. I think it's interesting. Just on the sort of the dynamics of supporters, have you noticed at all, sort of anecdotally or in data, that a lot of the supporters of survivors that you find, will they have had lived experience of trauma themselves?
It does happen.
Was it quite varied more generally?
Yeah, it's definitely. I think the circumstances of the supporters vary greatly. I think, there's no other way to put it, essentially.
Yeah, it's so there's no one blueprint.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think sort of a myth and misconception, perhaps, that I've carried myself until recently, would be that a lot of people who end up in relationships with a survivor may themselves have gravitated towards them because they see they recognize some kind of lived experience. But it is a lot broader in terms of what people are bringing.
Yeah, I would say so. So it does happen. It does absolutely happen. There are some who know people already that's happened to, and are survivors. And there are some people who this is completely new to them. They've never even
fish out of water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it can be so overwhelming to sort of even know where to begin. Yeah. So there's a vast sort of breadth in experience on that front.
And there's a role in support for other professionals as well. How do you think, if as a professional yourself, what kind of advice would you give to someone who is maybe handling an unexpected sort of disclosure from someone that they have either supported or someone that they love or have a close relationship to? What's your kind of advice to them about, that first step of how do you contain and support someone?
I think it's really important for sure to do what you can to make sure that person who is disclosing something very personal to them, something that they might not have disclosed before, giving them the space to do that. I think it can be very easy to run into sort of question mode and sometimes those questions can sound, I suppose, accusatory, because you're coming from a place of care and sort of you're almost doing a kind of reverse risk assessment in your head, trying to work out how this might have happened or what the circumstances were.
What the steps led up to it.
Exactly.
Why did you go to this place, for example? But how that might land with a survivor.
It can feel quite accusatory, and it might make the survivor feel less safe in sort of disclosing. So I think it's really important just to allow them to have that space, share the information that they're willing to share at their pace. And of course, I think this might go without saying, but to believe them. I think something that can happen, and I do kind of understand, is when you hear this information from someone you care deeply about, that this has happened to them, sometimes you can go into your head and think, what is easier to process here? The idea that I'm finding out that this really traumatic event has happened to someone I love, or there's been some sort of misunderstanding, or there is something that's happened here that means that they haven't been through that. And it can be very easy to sort of not believe it, even though it can be coming from a place of care and love.
To search for the kindest reality.
Exactly.
Sometimes it can be a place of how do I, and this is obviously an internal thing, how do I justify a feeling that I might have failed this person, that I didn't protect them enough? Or it could be as simple as, maybe this didn't happen, maybe we can pull this back, maybe we can pull the cloth back across this.
Exactly.
But it doesn't, the genie doesn't go back in the bottle. And what can be kinder to yourself is not always kinder to that other person. And it's a difficult space to exist in.
Absolutely.
Speaking about kindness to oneself, which is really, really important, of course, as a supporter, there's all kinds of different metaphors about you can only give so much from your own cup as you fill up for your own self, and so on and so forth. Is there any advice you would give to our supporters who, hopefully have this network available to them, but need to balance that fine line of being the carer, being the listener, and also looking after their own well-being?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any sort of guidance out there available? Or?
Yeah, it's such a hard balance to strike, for sure. And I think it's very easy to feel compelled to kind of give either all or nothing, to give everything that you have, and then become so fatigued by that it can be really hard to continue doing that. And I think it's important to be honest with yourself and with those around you. If you are having a hard time, it's important to acknowledge that. It can be very tempting to put your own feelings aside and put your needs aside because you feel that you need to be this kind of omnipotent sort of rescuer, when we're all human and we need that time to, if we're struggling, to do what we need for ourselves to feel better and to, I guess, manage our own well-being. I think anecdotally I've heard stories of loved ones who have kind of put aside their hobbies and their things that bring them joy because they want to make sure that either the sort of the family unit or the survivor that they're supporting is kind of tended to.
Yes.
I wish there was one sort of magic strategy to sort of maintain that balance.
If there was, this service wouldn't need to exist.
Exactly.
Everyone would get it.
Yeah. But I think most important, being honest with yourself about how you're doing. And I think being honest with those around you as well is super important. Knowing what you're capable of and what you need a break from.
Capacity, 100%.
Exactly.
No, certainly. And what you mentioned there about, you said the word rescuer, and the tiny part of my brain that pretends to be a therapist awoke suddenly and thought about the kind of dynamics of conflict. And certainly that if you act as someone's rescuer for a long period of time and you're not able to sort of put the Band-Aid on this bullet wound of survivorship, then it can turn into that pattern of resentment, and you can start to feel like a victim in yourself. And so it's a really, really difficult dynamic that we're talking to here. Yeah, certainly from what I've seen, it can be quite hard to work out how to care for each individual person from a sort of a stereotypically feminine perspective. I know for some of our guys who might not be engaged with the service themselves, but have their supporter engaged, it can sometimes be too much of a pressure to be the kind of emotional center, the emotional processor for a male experience, because men don't often, certainly if they've not been in our spaces, don't often feel like as a man themselves they may be allowed to do the processing on their own. They might need someone to help work out the emotions for them and give them the self-care. And then alternatively, from the masculine perspective, telling on myself here, sometimes there can be sort of a stereotypical urge to skip to the solution, to move past that listening phase that's really important and just problem solve. So having a space that is quite literally a workshop built from the experiences of other supporters is utterly crucial. Before that workshop existed, before the project began, were there any clear gaps in the support that was available to supporters that you sort of sat down and with the organization and thought, right, okay, we need to fix this. There's an avenue here that we need to put a clear road to support. How bad was it before this began?
I think what was really difficult, and is still difficult to this day, is sort of across the country, there are very few organizations that have specialized services and support in place for the loved ones and supporters. Don't get me wrong, there are some out there that are incredible and doing incredible work, but they are not, they're not readily available and as available as I think would be ideal.
Visible.
As visible, exactly.
Well.
That was definitely the next point, is the ones that do exist is that it's not always super clear that there is that support available for loved ones and supporters as well. There have been a couple of times where I've, people have called up because they're concerned about someone they care for and love, that, and have heard that that person has gone through this experience.
Yeah.
And even as they're calling, we are survivors, they're not aware that there is support in place available for them. So it takes us sort of letting them know.
Yeah, no, certainly it's a difficulty of the fact that this project is recent and still growing and will continue to grow, that many of our older clients, survivors who've been with the service for a little while, or maybe dipped their feet in and they're just only getting back into it now, won't know it exists. And we have to try and signpost it at every opportunity, the earliest opportunity. I think it's an uphill battle to let people know about this. And certainly, I think we need to push it as far as we can, because
Definitely.
we know there are so many survivors out there who have really crucial and important people in their lives. And it's really difficult to think that if that person isn't supported, that could be the table leg that gets cut off. And it could be the difference between someone having a breakdown or having a strong and supported recovery.
Absolutely. And I think I've just thought of another sort of difficulty that we have faced. I've at times I've reached out to people. There have been loved ones who have been kind of present, and I've let them know that there is support available to them. And there's this misconception that by accepting support themselves, they are somehow taking support and energy and attention away from the survivor that they're supporting. And I guess that's a kind of misconception I want to really address, because the resources are here and available.
These are separate channels.
Exactly, they're separate channels, and those services are available. And it's by no means burdening anyone. No. It's kind of the goal is to strengthen and reinforce the whole kind of wraparound support network.
Yeah. No. The supporters in survivors' lives are so crucial. We can't undervalue the role they've played. I'm really, really lucky to have been supported by people throughout my own journey. And, to know that their lives could have been made easier by a service like this, it's a gosh darn, but give it to the next person and just pass that forwards 100%. Now, we've already talked at length about the sort of the robust offering that we are building around people's supporters, but bringing us back to this space that we are, for those enjoying the visual part of this podcast, quite literally in right now, the Nightingale Suite. What have been some of the successes we've seen about moving interviews out of those police rooms and into a space like this?
What I think is it has really helped empower the person who is reporting and going through the criminal justice process. I think what is really important is doing everything we can to make the process such that the survivor can feel that they have as much choice and control over the narrative, especially when it can be quite a stressful process calling back and thinking back to times where they perhaps didn't feel in control.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
And so having this space, the feedback has been, 100% and overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, unsurprisingly,
that they felt comfortable and in the best position because they've been in a familiar space, a place where they know, for example, that there are professionals in the building who understand what they're going through, are around and nearby. It's made them feel comfortable enough to feel as though they've done the best they can to give the best evidence they can. And hearing that feedback has been really rewarding, and hearing from the officers as well that have come here saying that the suite looks great and the facilities are great, and the flexibility as well. The availability of the space is really useful, because one of the logistical challenges that we can have for example at police stations can be availability of the space,
the offices as well. Certainly,
exactly. And so it's been really promising and positive to hear that it's had that effect on them, and that they feel as though it has empowered them to sort of do everything they can to...
and time will tell as the justice process turns onwards whether or not the improvements in feeling relaxed within this space, of feeling confident, calm in a familiar environment, will lead to honest moments coming out before the court, hopefully lead to the right outcomes and prosecutions. So, we can only hope, but those wheels keep turning. I wanted to read a quote briefly. I surprised you with this, but this is a quote specifically about someone and from someone who had just done an interview and how they felt after leaving this space. "I feel good. My partner is on her way home from work. We're going out for a meal. The kids are home, excited about Christmas, but today was good, and I couldn't have done it without you guys. I really couldn't. When I'm with friends, I think I have to be hard, made of cement, but I'm not. I need to talk, and I need to say what happened to me. You guys have helped me do that. Honestly, you've been brilliant." So let's toot the horn for a moment there, not just for ourselves, but for him. So that is the change.
Yeah.
That is the impact in his words. And I certainly hope the project continues strongly into the new year.
Absolutely.
Michael, thank you for the interview, but do stick around. Don't go nowhere, because it's time for the news segment. In the news segment, as you may imagine, we talk about the stories that affect and impact our survivors and their supporters, both in our own community and out in the global world. Now, most recently for us, it's the release of the new Violence Against Women and Girls strategy for 2026. This is a bit of a misnomer, because some of you may well know, violence against women and girls includes violence against men and boys as well. The strategy is named as such because it associates crimes that are traditionally and typically and statistically more likely to impact women and girls, such as domestic violence, sexual abuse, and rape. However, underneath the statistics that have always been published, and the sort of the crime statistics figures and promises about impact on victims and statements that have been produced by the police and by crime commissioners, they have always included all of the offences that have taken place against men and boys over the last decade. We are hoping that is changing, because we don't want to take that space away. It's really important that we talk about and are able to focus on the horrible things that women are still having to put up in this current age. But I don't want to take funding away from them. I want to have a space for men and boys as well, so we can deal with the separate circumstances and the impact that does affect men and women differently from each other. So as part of that, the new Violence Against Women and Girls strategy has come up with the hilariously named explanatory note. As you called it earlier, the mansplaining note.
The mansplaining note.
The mansplaining note, the explanatory note for men and boys, which references and quite publicly acknowledges that, yes, these crime statistics, violence against women and girls, do include men and boys. Here's how we're going to treat things differently. Here's how we're going to acknowledge some of these crimes that affect men disproportionately. So as an example of that, the report highlights in the year ending March 2025, the crime survey for England and Wales shows that approximately 2 million men had experienced domestic abuse, sexual assault, or stalking in the last year, equating to 8.4% of all men aged 16 or over, which is just a horrifying number. The strategy recognizes that there are rapidly evolving and emerging forms of abuse. We are seeing deeply concerning new forms of sexual violence and exploitation online, particularly financially motivated sexual extortion, known as sextortion, in which victims are intimidated into paying money to a perpetrator who is threatening to share nude or semi-nude images of them. So financially motivated sexual extortion among under 18s, which is really additionally concerning, has increased 8-fold in the past year, from 29 reports to 176 reports. But of course, many of the victims of these crimes stay silent out of embarrassment, a higher level of embarrassment. 91% of those victims were boys. 89% of the total reports of sextortion to the revenge porn hotline in 2024 also involved male victims. So these kind of crimes are disproportionately affecting men and boys. So a new strategy which hopes to address this and look at this. I know online safety can be a sticky subject, but it is really promising on paper. I think that's the sort of the key takeaway. Promising on paper, ready for the action. But everything within the mansplaining note is actually really, really good. It's really important seeing this acknowledged for the first time. Acknowledgement of female perpetrated sexual offences, which is very close to my own heart. More support has been promised at family court to protect vulnerable children, help support fathers, which is nice. It's funny to say this, which is nice, but it is nice. There's also been a review of online protections and vulnerabilities, and a renewed effort to help men speak up after acknowledging many of the barriers to silence that are created by unhealthy pressures around masculinity. A lot of the coverage of the report is talking about tackling toxic masculinity, and of course that's really, really crucial as well, but it's important looking at not just the role that men play in perpetrating abuse, but actually taking a step back and saying, you can be victims too, and this is why that masculinity might be getting in the way. Having sort of scanned the report yourself, is there anything that sort of lands as part of your own sort of wish list for the new year? Anything you feel like you want to see more in action?
I think I echo pretty much entirely what you've said, and I think these initial notes on paper look very promising. I think having that distinction that the experiences that men and boys face in the wake of sexual violence, of domestic violence, is kind of its own category that shouldn't either sort of be included or in any way take away from the very real narratives that that women and girls face on a daily basis. I think it's really promising to see that distinction is starting to be made.
It's being drawn.
I think it was, I sort of wrote a small piece that was included in the notes, which was sort of very personal to me, and it was important, I think, to stress that, when I was early on in my survivorship journey, it kind of felt like there was nowhere for me to turn, and it felt like there weren't robust systems in place to support me in any sort of capacity. So to see these conversations happening now is really promising, and I guess I hope that we see the action that hopefully will follow these ideas that have been shared.
No, 100%. I mean, I can relate back to my own experiences in my late teenage years, clicking on the Support for Men page on the NHS sort of website, discussing, support for rape specifically. And I thought the webpage hadn't loaded because there was only one tiny thing at the top and it didn't have any, sort of address on it. It looked like a failed loaded webpage. I refreshed it a dozen times and just my mind went to, is that it? So seeing this support come in is really, really crucial. It's important to say that, whilst I may laugh at the male explanatory note and the fact that it's just called a note, it's by no means a footnote as part of history. You mentioned you contributed to yourself. It will have impact through its actions. When those actions become reality, it is a piece of history that is really, really crucial. I don't want to come across as someone who's complacent or not acknowledging that or looking like I'm not satisfied. I'll only be satisfied when rape is a thing of the past. But right now, it is moving in a more promising direction. And it's important to me, certainly, that along with yourself, there were other excerpts of survivors included within this research. I've talked about this before in a previous episode with, Siobhan Weir, where I discussed specifically the importance of using direct quotes from survivors, putting survivors' stories in every piece of research, every piece of impact. And so to add your own words to that, I'm really grateful for that. So thank you. We now move into our final segment for today, which is the letters segment. Now, as a sort of a special inclusion for this season, I thought it was very poignant to include work from the ongoing I Wish You Knew project that Michael has also helped contribute to. These are stories written by survivors around the topic of what you wish someone knew. That could be, a past self, it could be a perpetrator, it could be a person close to you, a loved one or a supporter, whatever title you're going for. Now, these submissions, of course, are sensitive in nature. Some of them may contain material that you may find triggering, but hopefully also beautiful. So if you would like to join us, I'm going to read one of them now. This one is called A Letter to My Inner Child. My child, I cry when I see you. Your face just points at the wall. My emotional senses feel you. Do you now hear my call? The abuse you suffered when younger is past, it's over, it's gone. Please forgive the people who hurt you. Come to terms with all that was wrong. It's okay to have felt unhappy. It was then that you traveled alone, but now you've grown much older. You're the best person I've ever known. Awaken the mind that is within you. Be at peace with your world that is now. I know I don't have all the answers. I can only advise on the how. Your journey now begins with a footstep. The way will be hilly, quite tough. But go this way, be happy, content that you go with my love. Thank you for listening. And thank you for joining us for today's episode, of course. Now, before I close out, I wanted to ask you, Michael, if someone was thinking about referring in as a supporter, wasn't sure if they wanted the support, what would your advice be to them?
Sure. So if at first you're not sure if you're ready or want to refer in and get support, we do have information on our website. Just look out for supporters of survivors, and there is information on there with a little bit of an insight into the kind of services that we offer. And if you feel like you would like support, you can ring our office and ask to refer into the Nightingale services. Our number is on our website, or you can reach out to our support inbox. And we can take it from there and talk you through what that process will look like. And even if you make that initial inquiry, there's absolutely no pressure to commit in any way. Or if you just want more information, just give us a ring. Yeah, no. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And for everyone who's listening here, if you're teetering on the edge, perhaps you're a supporter of a survivor yourself, I advise you to take Michael's advice. There is no pressure to commit to anything.
It's your support journey. What you're comfortable with is exactly what you'll receive. Now, thank you for listening. From our safe space to yours, goodbye.